implications of the Biden administration's Buy American policies. Doreen Edelman is partner and chair of the Global Trade and Policy team at the law firm of Lowenstein Sandler. Hello, Doreen.
Hi, sir.
Thank you very much for being with me today. I appreciate it. This is a crucial issue that everybody's talking about, has big impact on international traders and the like. Let's start by just let me ask you, what should global traders and supply chains know about the Biden administration's Buy American rule and how it relates to the administration's initiative on reviewing critical supply chains?
Thanks for asking, Bob. I'm glad you think this is an important issue. The Buy American Act is part of the government's holistic approach. There's a lot of factors that are coming into this. And as you know, the Buy America Act is not new. It's been around about 70 years. But this is the first time they're actually looking at changing the content requirements and making a larger differential in the benefit for purchasing domestic over foreign. The changes will not preclude foreign product purchases. It'll just make it more expensive to buy foreign products. Mm-hmm. And the goal here is several-fold. The goal fits into the national security concerns, the concerns regarding specific products like semiconductors, expensive batteries, even pharmaceuticals and active pharmaceutical ingredients. We don't want to have to rely on non-US parties or not our best friend countries, most favorite nations, to provide those products. Mm-hmm. You put this on top of the task force recommendations. Now, the Buy American Act changes have not yet gone, they're in the comment period now, but my understanding is there are going to be changes that is bipartisan, and it will happen very quickly this fall. But on top of that, we have these task force recommendations and congressional legislation, and they dovetail nicely with the Buy American Act requirements because the task force recommendations want the supply chain to mitigate risks, again, for national security purposes, for government jobs, for commercial products. This is not just about defense products. The government purchased about $600 billion worth of products, and most of them are commercial. So whether it's IT services or it's masks and healthcare products, the government purchases all of that. So this is not something that should only be of concern to defense manufacturers. It should be of concern to every US manufacturer. And what I think the point here is that companies need to be aware of where they fit in this whole big picture. And that means there is no option. They have to understand their supply chain, and there's no shortcut to doing this.
And you say understand, mean understand beyond your immediate supplier. I would think that would not this government rule extend to multiple tiers of supply, the raw materials or the components that go into a product that might be made here in America, but the parts of which are sourced elsewhere. That's got to come under the rule too, probably, right?
Yeah, and I think this is the biggest takeaway. Traditionally, supply chain has been handled in companies by a logistics manager, mm-hmm. a transportation department guy. In some small companies, it's the same person who's the receptionist, who handles the Fed Expresses, who,
Sure.
You just took on the job.
By necessity, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, now I think these issues have to be pushed up the chain. They've got to end up with the board or the C-suite executives, because this has to be part of your strategic planning. As you just alluded to, it isn't just, oh, well, we're a domestic company. We buy from Joe Blow down the street. But do you know where Joe Blow gets his product? I was talking to a company just a couple hours ago. They buy all domestic, but all their products come from overseas. So by definition, they're affected by things like, well, did your supplier who brings this product in from China, does it come from the Yin Yang region where there's legislation pending that is going to assume that any product from that region in China, unless you prove otherwise, is made from slave labor and is a human rights abuse? So if you don't, in your company sitting here in Peoria, Illinois understand where your products are coming from and their components are coming from. You can't plan alternative sources. You can't make sure you're going to meet these government contracting requirements. Oh, and by the way, it isn't just that. Your customers are going to start demanding certifications so that they can certify their supply chain is clean. It's starting with the BAA. I say it's going to end up with a full type of NAFTA-ish certification for manufacturers.
Now, as you point out, it's going to extend well beyond Defense Department procurement because the government buys so many everyday items that we consumers also buy too. Does this mean this will have an effect even beyond government procurement to the health and welfare of companies that sell outside the government domestically? I mean, it will impact everybody?
I think the companies that are going to be the most successful are those that are going to understand their supply chain, what it's going to mean, and the implications. Because as you're seeing, corporations are getting caught up every day in human rights, environmental diversity, and supply chain national security issues. What are they doing about it? I'm afraid to say that we're going to have a supply chain bifurcated world. You're either with us and in our US defense right now, anti-China, anti-Russia supply chain, or you're going to make products that go into their supply chain. And you're going to have to prove that, because companies are not, they're going to require it because they don't want to be embarrassed when they're in the Wall Street Journal, for one thing. So it's about the defense, national security, and it's also about touting, I don't want to say, I guess, domestic content. Part of this Buy American thing is that we want to show the benefit and value of US labor. So it can be used promotionally as all our products come from a clean supply chain. Or a transparent supply chain, just like they're doing in California, where they're targeting, there's no slave labor, child labor involved, a transparent supply chain.
Well, do you think that the rule, when it finally comes down, will amount to pretty much of a government fiat saying to industry, just adjust? Or will it take into account the complexity and the time involved in reshoring or resourcing product domestically? Because it's going to take a while for companies to adjust, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and we've seen this because of the 301 tariffs. That's what really started it. It was the first time companies had to say, well, heck, we don't know where else, this has been our supplier for 50 years. We haven't looked at other countries and opportunities. So yes, it cannot happen overnight. And that 301 process showed companies how much it's going to cost them and how time consuming. And even in this data-driven world, you might not be able to get all the information you need to make those shifts. But I think it's not going to be an immediate. I mean, this BAA domestic content change is going from 55 to 75. It's not going to 90 or 100%. And there are a lot of exceptions. In fact, the big one is if you happen to be purchasing it from a trade agreement company where we have a special arrangement like Israel or Jordan or Mexico and Canada, you get a card to bypass the restrictions. Those countries are being considered the same on a level playing field as American, at least as of right now.
So the USMCA, remember, the Canada, Mexico, the United States are all considered equal in the eyes, will be considered equal in the eyes of this rule.
Right, and there's going to be obviously tiers. Countries are going to be ranked. Turkey just unfortunately got stuck on the cusp. They're part of NATO. They were part of the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. I think I have the name correct. But they then were using or working with some Russian suppliers. So we have had to adjust, and it showed component parts and assembly manufacturers in this country where their supply chain actually is and how flexible it is to shift with these demands. So we're going to have to think about these things in the boardroom.
Yeah, but it seems like this could be even more drastic than the 301 tariffs against China, because in that case, you could say, okay, we can't bring stuff in from China. We'll move to Southeast Asia or something like that, where labor is still cheap. This rule would require you to come back to the North America where wages are significantly higher, labor might be short, difficult to build factories. So I could see the impact being even greater.
Yes and no. If that works out, that a company can come back to the US, that's the best of all worlds because you're providing that US labor and content and value. And you're also addressing the national security concerns, but that doesn't have to be the answer. There are alternatives. Remember, the BAA is not saying that you can't buy. It's saying that you're going to have to pay more money to buy from that manufacturer in the other third country. But
I see. Yeah.
But that's the point. It doesn't just want to we don't want to swap one country for the other. If it can come to the US, that is, the 100% score at the top. But hey, maybe we can bring it at least to Mexico. Then we're shortening the labor or the transportation costs, and we're getting the benefit of the NAFTA, which is something else. The US and its multilateral approach is good, which is another point that, again, as part of this whole holistic approach, the Biden administration isn't trying to make it just US oriented. We want to work with our best trading partners, almost again as a carrot. You want to work with us, well, then you work with us on the national security issues. And maybe as a result of that, you will also get some trade preference benefits. I mean, it's all going hand in hand.
Because if we're too drastic about it, it could tip the scales toward, in the eyes of our trading partners, protectionism.
Absolutely, which is why the new, what they're saying at least is the Biden administration in bilateral and multilateral talks and agreements, they're going to talk this up, that we're doing this together with our allies.
I see. Okay. Well, maybe not as drastic as it seemed at first blush, but certainly this Buy American rule is going to have an impact on industry. Doreen Edelman of Lowenstein Sandler, thank you for shining a light upon some of the subtleties and nuances of the rule, what companies need to be doing to prepare for it. Thank you so much for being with me. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thanks.